Hey everyone, welcome to SPED Homeschool Conversations. We are happy that you are with us again tonight for another live episode of our broadcast. And tonight we are wrapping up our online resources, which we've been talking about all May. And it was just like the perfect thing to talk about, not knowing that even COVID 19 was going to happen when we planned this. I mean, I don't know, Kareem. I think we planned this in November of last year.
It was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago, yes. And so who knew? But I think a lot of parents right now are thinking about what kind of online options do I have for my student, especially one that struggles, because so many online options go too fast or they just don't fit students. And so we're going to talk about self-paced um, options that you can have and just how you can make the most of those programs for struggling learners. And I have Karim Morato with me tonight, and she teaches self-paced classes. So she knows it from the inside out. So thank you for joining me tonight,
Not a
Karim.
problem. No, thank you for
Yeah,
inviting me. And not only that, but I also have been a student. I have been a student of a lot of self-paced courses.
that's great.
So I
Yeah.
can tell you the perspective from the student
Mm-hmm.
and also the perspective from the teacher.
That's a really good perspective because as parents, we can look at a program from the parent side and say, oh yeah, the teacher must be doing a good job. But then our student comes to us and just like pulling their hair out, going, I can't do
Well,
this.
and I think it's important to define what is a self-paced type of learning.
That is a very good thing to start with.
And
Yes.
and I think it's a non-traditional way to learn. It is not
Mm.
teacher-led, it's not class-led, it's just non-traditional. And a lot of resources right now, especially now, institutions like very high-level institutions, they are releasing a lot of self-paced courses so
Yeah.
students can take it. But one
Mm-hmm.
of the things I have learned, Peggy, is that information is not education, and sometimes you
Yes.
can uh,
Mm-hmm.
like if you are like me, I go into those free educational sites, and then I go, oh, this will be great, it will be great for him to learn Chinese, and he will be learn this is like an excellent history course. And I
Uh
put
huh.
all this like a menu, and I ended up frustrated, and I also ended up frustrating my own kids, so we have to be careful
Mm-hmm.
about that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. If it's free and yeah, you've really got to dig through it and see if it's really worthy of your time.
Yes,
And yeah,
and
it's
yes, and I think the most important advice my professor gave me when I was creating my online courses. I went to school to get my master's to learn how to teach online and how to create
awesome.
curriculum online. And my
Mm,
professor said he kept telling us every single time we met, in class. He always asked, "What is the end in mind?" We
mm,
always started planning with what is the end in mind. And that
yeah.
phrase, it completely changed the way I plan my own learning, my
Mm-hmm.
kids' learning, even how even when I am creating quizzes or activities, I
Yeah.
always remind myself, what is the end in mind? And I think this is a good
Mm-hmm.
way to tackle, because just because we have a course, we are not going to do the whole thing. Nobody finish
That is a very
every
good point.
single
Exactly.
activity. And I feel like when, like, I don't know if it's a Hispanic thing, but we always tell our kids, well, you do it or use it because we pay for it.
Yes. No, I think that's a frugal parent thing.
Yes, that's true. So, and
Yeah.
I think as a kid, we need to ask ourselves as parents and say, okay, is this self-paced learning a course, or could be a
Mm,
textbook? It cannot just be something related with videos and units, but we
yeah.
need to ask ourselves, is this learning going to be supplemental learning, or it's
Mm,
going to be foundational learning? That
yeah.
means something else is coming after the first level. And
Mm,
that's very important, Peggy, because if
yeah.
we don't ask that question as a homeschool parent, we can end up buying a lot of things that we don't need and ended up very
Right.
frustrated.
Right. We end up putting classes in because we think we need to cover that. And again, we're trying to check the boxes versus looking at the end in mind, like you were talking about. Checking boxes doesn't get you to the end you want.
Test
It's
result.
laying out the plan and then following a plan that gets you,
You know,
stepping stones. And like you said, it's foundational or it's extra, but those are all stepping stones moving in that direction.
well, of course, who is thinking about transformational learning when you are doing algebra? I don't know. I am not. You have to do it because you have to do it. But it's important for us. Let's talk about the benefits because there are challenges, but also there are amazing benefits when it
Mm,
comes to self-paced courses, such as flexibility. You create your own learning
right.
experience.
Mm-hmm.
Your student, it could be if it's a teen or maybe an upper elementary student, is going to learn how to, think in a way that is critically because they have to figure it out. How do we gonna get this learning done in our own? Also, there are
Mm-hmm.
organizational skills because they have to manage this new type of work. So there are
Right.
benefits, tremendous
Yes.
benefits. And I guess the number one reason sometimes we get it is also flexibility and also financial because
Mm-hmm.
it's gonna cost us less. Like you say, could be free or could be a low price because that's not
Mm-hmm.
include a teacher. So there
Right.
are amazing benefits when it comes
Wait,
to
I
that.
want to ask you a question because something you mentioned makes me think. So, our students are learning these skills, but they don't start with them. So, how much involvement should a parent expect when they first start a program when their child's never done something like that before? I mean, because you can't just like throw them to the wolves and say, okay, here's your online program, now start and go for it, because I think that's setting them up for failure.
Yes. Well, I have, let me give you an example. For my self-paced speaking curriculum, for the elementary level, I
Mm-hmm.
tell parents, minimum for upper elementary, you have to train your kids how to do it at least for 2 months.
Mm.
And one thing is you show them. That means training means we show them how to log in, how to organize the materials. We check on them. And then
Mm-hmm.
we start releasing to see once they start doing the routine, we say, okay, they are doing it. And still we check on
Mm-hmm.
them.
Right.
But I'm going to tell you, sometimes age does not matter because you can
Right.
have teen. I mean, personally,
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna tell you, some of my self-paced courses has been history, for example,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna tell you, uh, he knows what was supposed to do, but it was something that is was not being done because
Mm.
he was managing AP classes and other courses that he was taking, and that history went to the low priority.
I had a child do that too. It didn't happen for a long
You know,
time, and I didn't even notice it.
and I take responsibility because
Mm-hmm.
we purchased the course based on the requirements that he needed, right?
Right.
And it looks so simple. We log in, and it's like, do you understand what you need to do? Of course I do. I'm gonna tell you what is the
Mm-hmm.
key here, Peggy. The key is not so much the how simple the course is, or how simple the instructions are, or how access to good teaching or good activities or quizzes, but it's how our children engage with the content. And
Yeah.
that's where I have failed with my own kids because, we got an amazing course, and
Mm.
but there isn't the engagement that needs to happen. So the transformation happens. So how my
Right.
student interacts with the content, it was not
Mm-hmm.
there. And because it was not there, it was not necessarily, it was in the schedule, but it was not necessarily being done.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Is we all want that feedback, that engagement, because I mean, it just is not as much fun when you're just, yeah, I logged in, I did what I'm supposed to do, I checked the box. I mean, there are kids that do that, but then there are the others that need a little incentive And
Well, I gotta tell you something. My history example did not end up in a good note. We tried for a year, did not
Mhm.
work, and I actually ended up finding a teacher because when I asked myself, okay, what do I need him to do now? And I'm gonna tell you
Mm.
how I realized we were in trouble because he was taking, oh, he is going to be taking an English class that requires a lot of logic and a lot of argument. And guess what he needs? He needs to
Mm.
understand history to do that.
Right.
And then we were like, oops, we are in trouble. So I went looking for
Yes.
a good history teacher, and I found this
Mhm.
amazing teacher that teaches history in a perspective of why today, what happened before. So
Oh
I was like,
yeah. Mhm.
so he is going to end up doing a history class where he's going to take care of two requirements. But it's
Mhm.
just something that we learn. I learned, and I take
Exactly.
full responsibility.
Yeah. Well, and it's a trial and error thing because one thing that works well for one child of yours is not going to work well for the next child, and we had the same issue with foreign language for my daughter. We tried all different types of courses. She did need a one-on-one, and we have hired a private tutor for her, and she's had 3 years of French
Wow.
with the same teacher, and her teacher's now living in Japan teaching her French. It's that's a long story.
But this is true, because I think if we are choosing, for example, when I chose to homeschool, decided I am not gonna I am not gonna become a math teacher. I am not gonna become a history teacher, an English teacher. So I had
Uh
to
huh.
look for these resources. And let's talk about
Right.
foreign language. Parents come
Mhm.
to me because they are like, I have no idea what I'm supposed to teach my child, and this is
Mhm.
why I created my self-paced courses because I realized, parents needed that option. They
Mhm.
could not take my live classes. They could not afford the live classes. So I really try to become the teacher in my self-paced courses. And I give,
Mhm.
even though they're self-paced, Peggy, I they have access to me because it is so hard
And that's
to
yeah,
do a
exactly.
foreign language with no access to a teacher.
Yeah, yeah, and that's yeah. So those are the types of questions that parents need to ask. Is what also comes with the courses because there are standalone self-paced courses that you just get the instruction and that's it.
Mhm.
Some come with review and other things. What are other things that parents can look for as what other options do some self-paced courses
I
offer as
think
well as
is
you?
let, I think the main thing is do a strategic planning. That means what is going to happen when motivation is gone and my student does not want to finish the course. We need
Very
to
good
ask
question.
that question when we
Mm-hmm.
purchase the course, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, obviously, like you were saying, you could be using a self-paced course for your French class, but then
Mm-hmm.
you hire a tutor. So how you kept up with the motivation of going to level one, level two, level three
Mm-hmm.
is that human interaction made a
Right.
difference.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
for her, it's made a huge difference. She
Yes.
needed somebody to push her,
Yes.
and that was an area
But
she could be pushed. Yeah.
and I always tell the parents, just because you have a tutor, maybe your tutor doesn't know what curriculum to teach. So I think if
Mm-hmm.
you can pair the tutor with the curriculum, that will be great. Also, you can get in touch with an expert, with a family
Mm-hmm.
member, like we are
Yeah.
doing some business type of learning, is
Mm.
self-paced, and my brother-in-law knows about investments, and I also
Hmm.
have a business mentor that my son, if he wants to, he can have access to them. And my son, we
Ah.
asked my brother-in-law, can my son contact you so if he has questions about investments? And he said
Right.
yes. And guess what? Now they have this beautiful relationship because they are
Mm-hmm.
texting back and forward. So that will be a good strategy to think when
Mm-hmm.
motivation, is gone, how we going to resuscitate?
That's a very good word. Resuscitate. Yes, especially when you're
Resuscitate.
working with teenagers. Is
Yes. Now,
there anybody in there?
also, if you are a busy mom or dad, because that's the reality we are
Mhm.
right now. We are working hard from home. We are doing everything at home. You need
Right.
to ask
Yes.
how we going to do a follow up. How we going to schedule
Mhm.
remember, you're not maybe teaching, but you're facilitating the learning. So that's
Right.
a good question to ask. When it's going to
Mhm.
happen? It could be Friday's check-in where you sit and you ask questions and they need to show you something.
Right.
That could be a good strategy, for busy parents
Mhm.
that are working. Say, okay,
Mhm.
when are we checking if the learning is being done?
Right.
Another is strategy for self-paced courses could be, okay, when it's gonna happen? Put it in a whiteboard. This is what we ended up doing
Mm.
with my son. We
Hmm.
put all his classes, his subjects, in a whiteboard in his room, and it was easy for my husband and I to approach him and say, "What is happening with that class? What's going on
Mm.
here?" And so one
Right.
one of his courses, he was so behind that the system kicked us out of the. He had no access to the class.
Oh
And we went, so we contacted people, say, can we have a plan? We're working on it. And
no.
that's the beauty of a homeschooling. That flexibility. But I'm gonna
Mhm.
tell you something. It's not gonna happen alone. And that's the thing, that it doesn't matter. I don't know about you, Peggy,
Mm.
but I have taken some self-paced courses, like hybrid type of thing. And
Mhm.
and it's very helpful when the teacher sends you the email. Is how things are going. Are you ready to present? Yes, you're like, of course, you forget.
Oh yeah.
Hey, some of the courses I even forgot the password.
Well, yeah, it's that accountability,
Yes,
and so if you're not, it really does depend on your schedule. I'm glad you pointed that out because with busy parents, and I even talked to somebody the other day. They said they both the parents were working from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. They
wow.
said we're to the point where we're like shoving food under the door to our kids. You know, that it's just crazy. They're all at home, they're together, but not really. And here the kids are supposed to be learning, the parents are working, and um, so building in those checks and balances, and I mean, like we were talking about earlier, Kareem, it's we have to create a margin in our lives. Something I'm learning the hard
Yes.
way.
Hmm.
um, but in those margin times when you have dinner, those are the times when you can ask those questions in conversation. They don't have to be like pointed and like in your child's face that you're asking about school, but well, teach me what you learned in history today. That's my daughter loves talking about World War II with my husband, which he loves hearing about World War II. So, and it's just so it's a good conversation for them to
Yes.
have, and she's reviewing what she learned in her history class, and he's enjoying the conversation.
And
So,
you know what? A teacher's secret, I'm gonna tell you. I know we as parents sometimes we skip the learning objectives. We're like, who cares about
oh
that
yeah.
information? We dive into the chapter. I'm gonna tell you something. Do not skip that. Because when you read okay, this is what are important. These are the
Mm,
objectives. Then as a parent, you can also step back and say, okay, are all these exercise worth our time?
mm.
Are these activities engaging, or should I change the activity and make it a project? You know?
Ah,
So, and
yes.
I think that's something that, again, from the beginning, when we talk about, let's think about the end in mind. When you
Mm-hmm.
read those objectives, then you know what the student is supposed to know and what he's
Right.
supposed to do or she's supposed to do. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's important that, sometimes, they're doing the class and we're doing everything, but then we need
Right.
to put ourselves in our children's shoes and
Mm-hmm.
say, is this exciting? Is this
Right.
entertaining? If
Uh-huh.
no, let's change this. Go
Mm-hmm.
and change the activity and make a project, and make it fun for the student, make it meaningful.
Right. It's not just busy work. I think we can make school into busy work and make it 8 hours a day. And it doesn't mean that our children are learning. I mean, it just means that they're busy.
Exactly, exactly. My daughter right now. I want to give this tip for the your
Yeah.
younger audience. My daughter, she's 10, so a lot of the things we are doing, because I don't want her to spend that much time online too.
Right. And I'm hearing that
We
from a lot of parents.
we
Mm-hmm.
I never imagined I was going to do that. So we take the textbook and we select certain readings and she reads aloud. So we are
Ah.
practicing reading at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
She's reading aloud, and then when she's reading aloud, I'm able to stop her and say, well, what do you think about that? I ask her questions. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we don't know the answer. So then we write it down in a
Yeah.
book and we say points to research. So she
Mm.
writes a list of things that she wants to go in depth. And
That's
sometimes we
awesome.
ended up with self-paced courses because she decides, I want to explore more of these. Uh, so
Mm-hmm.
we don't start with this with the course, but we ended up with the course because we want to
Mm.
explore more in depth. And self-paced courses are amazing for that. One, maybe to
Mm-hmm.
explore an interest. Maybe your child say, "Oh, I want to do this." Really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, go and take that self-paced course, and you will say, realize no, that was not the case. You know.
Right.
But then, if your child is learning about something that he already loves or she loves,
Yes.
then you can say,
Mm-hmm.
hey, let's check a self-paced course to see if you can learn more in depth. And I can tell you,
Mm-hmm.
because you go into the self-paced course with a motivation, most
Mm.
likely your child will engage with the content.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And
I
it's
hope
not
it makes
just.
sense what I'm saying.
Oh, it does completely because yeah, we it goes back to what you said at the very beginning. You want your student to reach the end goal that you have for them, and the end goal ultimately is to lead them in the direction that their passions and pursuits are leading them.
Exactly.
And when we take the time to take a step back and instead of saying, well, here's your English, here's your history, here's your math, but are those fitting into those steps and those, like you said, foundations and extras that all kind of funnel towards that end goal? um, and as you get up in grades, it becomes all the more important.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think there is a time, a place for things. Also, when let's talk about learning tools, because there
Mm-hmm.
is so much tools there, so many tools that we can find. Like to learn a language, you can find
Mm-hmm.
apps, you
Right.
can find so many resources. But
Mm-hmm.
then we need to ask ourselves, I remember one person telling me, oh, my child can learn Spanish through YouTube videos. And I was like, really?
Mm.
So I did not argue that because that
Uh-huh.
could, I have never
Okay.
met a student that say, two things. I have always asked a student, hey, have you learned Spanish using only an app? And they say no. Have you learned Spanish only using YouTube videos? No. However, these are excellent learning tools to enrich
Right.
what we are doing because the kids
Mm-hmm.
love the YouTube platform, maybe, and just finding different teachers teaching the same
Mm-hmm.
concept, a different perspective. That's amazing.
Right.
But I think it's nice when we are able to find a resource, a course that will have a logical learning path, that you are not going to have
Exactly.
to go and find out every single resource to put it together. You don't want to be a
Right.
curriculum designer. I
No.
went to school for that.
Yeah, we don't have time for that as parents. I mean, I know. I was talking to somebody today, and they're like, "Well, are you an educator in a school?" I'm like, "No, I have a degree in physics. I just taught my own kids. I I used other people's curriculums to teach them."
Yes.
So
And,
yeah.
and I think you say something very important, Peggy. You are using other people's curriculum. So, and this is very important. A lot of
Mm,
parents come to me for Spanish because they saw me teaching in my Facebook page and they like my
mm-hmm.
energy. And I really appreciate when parents say that. But,
Yeah.
if you are a very quiet kid and here I am saying, Hola, ¿cómo estás? They will be like, I don't think she's for me. Like I gotta tell you, my older daughter, she already disqualified me as her Spanish
Oh
teacher.
no.
she will tell me like, calm down, mom. So I always ask the parents,
Uh,
do you want me to calm down because my kids think I'm too loud? And they're like, no, 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 we like your energy. But it's good.
yeah.
You have different
Mm-hmm.
teachers. When a
Right.
teacher creates a curriculum, the curriculum is coming from a human person, right? And sometimes
Exactly.
that's good to
Mm-hmm.
differentiate when you are getting a curriculum from who? Is this
Mm-hmm.
curriculum more like a digital type of creation? So it's gonna
Right.
feel less personal. But if
Mm-hmm.
maybe you find a teacher that you love and she
Mm-hmm.
has a self-paced course, that
Yeah.
will be excellent. So I think
Mm-hmm.
like you're saying, finding how our kids learn,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, uh,
And yeah,
that's
and like you said, just this the personalities and the people. Because I know my oldest on the spectrum would
mhm.
not want a teacher that had any emotions at all. He'd be happy with just the computer interface because that would like distract him. He would not be able to learn. And so again, it's just it is unique to each child as to what's going to work. And so yeah, it's finding that synergy. I
Yes,
guess is the word that best describes that is there's something that clicks, and it can be a personality, but it can just be the mode that your child engages best. I know we have this funny story. My kids, I was trying to teach them to type, and I wanted to use a self-paced course to do that.
hmm
But the problem was the game was written. It was written as a game, like a
hmm
video game. And my boys are gamers, and so the end goal for them is winning. The only problem when you teach typing is not to win; it's to repeat and repeat and repeat. And so they got so frustrated because they just wanted to win that game and be done with it. So we ended up replacing the game with a book that made them repeat and repeat and repeat.
What you're saying, that's such an excellent example, because it's just like my Spanish one course.
Mm.
I provide flashcards. For
Ah,
the students
yes.
that want to do the flashcards.
Mm-hmm.
Well, some parents told me my child hates the flashcards. Okay.
Okay.
But then I have the other parents saying, oh, my child loves the flashcards, loves playing.
Exactly.
Yes. So you know what I did? I ended up creating a PDF where students can print the page and they write the word in Spanish and English, Spanish and English.
Hmm.
Some parents say, that page is amazing. Some
Hmm.
students say, Señora Morato, we hate the page. You know,
Yeah.
so, so I like putting things where, as
Mm-hmm.
I discover how my students learn, I like
Yeah.
putting different things in place inside the course, because I know it's going to
Mm.
be very effective. Like last year, I realized that my students were afraid to speak, even when they were a Spanish one. Like the first readings, they
Mm-hmm.
were afraid to speak. So what I did is I record myself, showing them how to pronounce each vocabulary word. Now, that took
Mm.
me forever. It took me like
Oh,
5 years.
sure.
Yeah. But guess what? My students tell me, my self-paced, because I get to meet with my self-paced students once in a while. We do
Mm-hmm.
like some live workshops, because as a teacher, I'm curious. Who is my,
Right.
who
Yeah,
is behind the course?
exactly.
I want to know. And you know what, Peggy? I have met with my self-paced students. These students are amazing, and
Mm.
they are making, they're moving forward in
Yeah.
learning Spanish and they're on, and I'm like blown away.
Wow.
And then one of the things they told me is like, thank you so much for making those videos of the pronunciation.
Ah.
And I was like, oh, that's so nice, because remember,
Mm-hmm.
these students don't have access to me, so it's for them, it's nice for me to
Mm-hmm.
see my face and me helping them pronounce the words. So I
Right.
so appreciate the fact that the students gave me feedback, and they told
Mm.
me this is difficult, this is
Mm-hmm.
hard, and I saw, and that's important. And when you
It
have a
is.
teacher creating the self-paced, that's a benefit, I think, because the
Mm-hmm.
parent can give the teacher feedback.
Yes, and yeah, it's a huge benefit because if you just find something online, somebody created, they probably created it for their own child, whether your child's identical to their child, that's usually the, well, take it or leave it, because this is what I made it for, and I'm not creating a new version. But for somebody like you that's, improving on your curriculum on a regular basis,
Yes.
that it's a huge benefit to your students. I know, especially learning a language, if you look at it on the paper and you're not used to pronouncing those vowels and those letters. I know my daughter with French, she's like, they don't even pronounce half of these letters that are in these words. But you're skeptical to say anything, but you want to have that practice to be able, because if you go into that country where you're speaking that language, you're going to be afraid to say anything because you're afraid you're going to say something you're not supposed to.
Exactly. And and it's hard because teenagers, they want to look cool. They don't want to look
Mm-hmm.
different. And I understand that. And this is why I decided to start creating my speaking curriculum for elementary students, which is self-paced. It's a completely different methodology I use, because the students, I teach them how to use the language in complete sentences. But I could see, but listen, I have been studying the results for the last 3 years, and parents are giving me feedback, and as they give me feedback, I improve each lesson. And I think
That's
that's
great. Yeah.
important for
Mm-hmm.
parents to when they are going to take a self-paced course, to say
Mm-hmm.
how we going to tackle this. And another thing that I
Yeah.
wanted to give a strategy is empower, if you have a teenager, empower your teen to say, okay, this is how I want to tackle the course. Give them some
That's a
space
very,
and say,
yes.
okay,
Mm-hmm.
you want to do your plan, then come up and let's sit together and show me how you're going to tackle that. And I think
Yeah.
that's important. I even do that with my live students.
Mm-hmm.
I tell them the first week of class always says, tell me how you're going to study. Tell me how you're going to
Mm-hmm.
get it done. And I think there is
Right.
something powerful that happens when teens are
Yes. Yeah.
empowered and they
Uh-huh.
realize, wait a minute, I'm driving my own education. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's something that can be learned from self paced courses, because the content is there
Right.
24/7. They have
Mm-hmm.
access to it anytime. They can
Right.
do it as many times they need. So
Mm-hmm.
it depends on them. So
Right.
one of the things that I discover is that sometimes I need to not just teach my child. Sometimes I
Mm.
also need to coach my child. What is the
Yeah.
difference? Teaching is,
Mm-hmm.
I tell them what
Right.
they need to know, and I
Mm-hmm.
tell them, do you understand what I'm saying? Yes. Repeat after me. And they tell me exactly what I want them. I
Uh-huh.
taught them well. But coaching them, a coach will see your attitude. Would
Yeah.
be like, I don't want to do it. I hate, like my students say, I hate Spanish. I would be like, why you hate Spanish? Like when somebody
Mm-hmm.
tells me I hate Spanish, I want to know why, because I know
Yeah.
that they need some coaching, some understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Why are we doing this? Why are we repeating so much? Why I have to do it daily? And I always say,
Mm.
remember, it's not to the length, it's how often. I want them to do 15
Yeah.
minutes, but do it daily. So that coaching role, sometimes as parents, we need
Mm.
to wear the hat and help our children understand why are we doing this, especially when they are
Mm-hmm.
teenagers.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's, when they're younger, we want to train them because, we do a lot of school with them when they're younger. Again, like back to the original conversation when we started talking about just how you need to be there to, walk your child through how to log on and, all these things that eventually they will get. And now you want them to get to a point when they're teenagers where they can just go in, log on, mark it off, and know that they actually did their best, engaging with the content. But that takes a long time of training. And if your student hasn't been trained to do that, if they, I'm thinking all these parents who had students going to public and private schools and now have students doing online learning, and they've just been thrown to the wolves. They haven't been trained at all, and parents haven't been given the time to really sit by them and train them. It's a completely different scenario than most homeschoolers start. They start out, just saying, okay, with the mindset, we're going to make this work, and we're going to train from the point that we start. Um, and so it's, taking that step back. And I think, if people are considering this option or any other option, to realize to build into that schedule just the training aspect. And I'm glad you brought that into the discussion.
Yes, and I think especially parents. I want to encourage any parent that is trying to figure it out, how to do schooling during because of the crisis. Keep that in mind and say, what is the end? At the end of the day, at the end of the year, what is it that I want my kid to do? Maybe
Right.
it's read better, close the
Mm-hmm.
gap in math. Maybe it's
Mm-hmm.
understand certain concepts better, and for that maybe
Right.
you don't need a whole course. Maybe you just
Mm-hmm.
need to target, just like when you go to the doctor and they tell you, take this is my pain, take this specific medicine. And maybe this is something that you can do with your child. And you can ask the teacher, what do you recommend? This is not working. Be honest
Mm-hmm.
with the teacher and say, this is not working. Tell me
Right.
what is, if we can, we want to finish the school year in a good note. Can
Mm-hmm.
you help me figure out what strengths or what skills I need to work on it in a more
Mm-hmm.
effective way?
Right. And if you're paying for a self-paced course and you have a teacher at your disposal, use them. They are part of your team. And they can give you a lot of feedback on your student, and so yeah, that is a really good resource.
Yes, and I think what you're saying is important because like in my case, my courses are hybrid. Even though my live classes, students come and join me on weekly basis. It's not
Mm-hmm.
to learn the concept because I already created the lessons in video form. So when the
Right.
students come to me, it's to speak Spanish. It's
Mm.
all practice speaking what they learn at home. But it's interesting because if they did not watch the videos
You
during the
know.
week, that when I ask them, they're like, I don't know, So my students learn by the 4 week, it's like, we better watch these lessons because she's
Right.
gonna ask us
She's
how to
gonna.
use it. And of course, I go over some concepts,
Mm-hmm.
but the idea is, and I think this applies to even self-paced courses, is how we going to apply what we are learning, how we going to apply
Right.
it, how it's going to
Mm-hmm.
become how can our children say, okay, this is useful. I
Right.
can see it.
Exactly.
I can see it. Why this I need to know this. And
Mm.
and if you're doing something for a self-paced that is a requirement for um high school, I want to encourage the parents to really take the time, the first unit, the first chapter, the first module, to really understand what is not working. Because if you
Mm-hmm.
wait until the end to
Oh
check,
yes.
it could be a disaster. I know some parents right now,
Mm-hmm.
they are trying to complete requirements, and they have
Mm-hmm.
to juggle two 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 classes because the first one
Right.
didn't know work, and
Mm-hmm.
I had to do it. I had to do some remediation
I've done
learning.
the same thing.
But I
Yeah.
think if we're gonna face reality, let's face it earlier. Don't
Mm-hmm.
wait, because the majority of students, the number one challenge, I learned when through my professor. Always he always say this: the
Mm.
number one challenge is that students will not finish the course. They will drop. They will quit.
Mm.
And I think it's important to, so when we start seeing the symptoms that this is not
Yeah.
working, it's better
Mm-hmm.
even sometimes to drop. If it's not gonna work, it's better to drop it and say this is not working.
Right. You're gonna beat a dead horse until it's really dead.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, we had I think we did one self-paced course. My son said he wanted to learn some IT, and it was just really dry. And I didn't find out until like months later. I asked him. I said, "How's it going? Or how's the modules going?" He goes, "Oh, I haven't done that in a while." You know, oh goodness. So what are we gonna do to make up this credit? And so we built a computer. We modified the name of the class did some more hands-on things versus, I mean, you can resurrect those credits through other things.
Exactly, but you're saying something very important, and it's good for us to tell the parents with high school students. Make sure that when you take a self-paced course, my daughter took a few. We had to know how to name it in the transcript, and how to
Yes.
describe them. That's very
Mm-hmm.
important, because you don't want, if you're planning for your child to go to college or whatever, you
Mm-hmm.
want to show that there was work done, even if it was
Right.
independent, even
Mm-hmm.
if you can show something, some projects, like for some, I
Right.
remember, like an English course, we even added the books that my kids read, because it was
Mm.
important to say it was not just a course. We added
Right.
some reading, some writing, some projects.
Mm-hmm. Right. Exactly. Yeah. All the different things that, yeah, sometimes, like a self-paced course sometimes only covers one aspect of that subject, where if you do want a more full um, curriculum, the more rounded out, you do have to look for other resources too.
Yes.
So that's a good point. Natalie said, "Hola, Kareem."
Oh, my dear
Sorry, I haven't put
friend.
that up. She
Hola,
took a long time.
Anita.
And then
¿Cómo
she said
estás?
she shared the video in about 20 groups. So thank you, Natalie. So if you are watching and you have a question about self-paced, we're talking about self-paced classes and how to get the most out of them for your struggling learner. We definitely would love to have your comments and questions in here for Kareem to answer. She's a curriculum developer and teaches online self-paced courses as well as live courses, and so I'm going to throw your website up here since I'm talking about you. Online Spanish Education Solutions for homeschool parents, and so it's homeschoolspanishcurriculum.com, where you can
Yes.
find
That's
the
where you can find
resources.
more about my programs, homeschoolspanishcurriculum.com. And I address the elementary needs, because I do believe, especially a language, it needs to start earlier.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to start as soon. Like, parents ask me, when should I start learning Spanish with my kids?
That's a really good question.
Yesterday?
Yeah, yesterday.
What about yesterday? I mean, listen, I was a high school teacher for 16 years. I taught in the
Mm-hmm.
classroom. I used to teach immersion and IB Spanish. I was passionate about high school Spanish. But
Mm-hmm.
then I realized, wait a minute, I want my students to be bilingual. By the end, when they finish high school, I want them to be able to say, I am intermediate advanced. And I realized
Mm-hmm.
I needed to create an elementary um, curriculum that addresses that. And plus, guess what?
Right.
My elementary child refused to speak Spanish. So, and that was like, can you imagine? I spent like grandma, which we could name her abuela. Grandma say, how come she does not speak Spanish? She has a Spanish teacher. She told me that for so long. So the only way for me to solve that is I created a curriculum for her. And guess what?
Mm.
She became part of the curriculum. She also speaks in the lessons with me.
Oh, that's awesome. Candace says, "Hey, ladies, two powerhouses."
Hi!
Thanks
Yum,
for joining us,
yum.
Candace.
Yes.
So, yeah, yeah. I did not make that bridge for my middle son. Having a degree in physics, I taught calculus to my oldest at home. My youngest is now doing college algebra with me. Well, we'll finish it up in her junior year.
Wow.
But my middle one, man, I could not teach him algebra.
But
It was just.
I know that's so difficult. I'm gonna tell you something. My kids, I remember my two oldest, they realized, and when they were in fourth grade, that I was not going to be able to help them in math. They were, so it was like an explosion. So things started building
Mm.
up in third grade. My kids were like, my mom is not that smart, I think, with math. You know, because every time we were doing a self-paced curriculum with teachings and everything, but every time they got stuck in math, and they will come to me with a question, I will be, let's find in YouTube what is the answer. And they were like, Mom, just tell me the answer. It's like, no, we need to.
I need the YouTube.
Yes. You know what? So I realized this is not working. So in seventh
Mm-hmm.
grade, and we did, and it was late for my, almost late for my daughter. We pay a really high price to get her where she needed to be, because guess what?
Mm-hmm.
My daughter is going to the university to be an engineer. So math
Oh,
and
yeah. So you need
science,
math. Uh-huh.
was very important. And I
Mm-hmm.
almost messed up, almost,
Mm-hmm.
until I realized I can't do this anymore, because I was literally holding my kids back. So
Mm-hmm.
I decided, okay, I'm going to solve the math issue the way it
Mm-hmm.
needed to be solved, and I had to, take drastic measures to
Mm-hmm.
bring them to where they needed to be. Now the youngest one doesn't have that issue, because I learned from my oldest one.
Well, and that's a really good point. Is there are certain things. I mean, we have to weigh what's important. Again, like looking at that end goal. I mean, if you have a student who has certain subjects that they need to have on their transcript, they need to have the base knowledge of that you can't provide. Usually, it's going to cost you a little bit of money, and you need to find some really good resources. For those things that are extracurricular, maybe art, and maybe they don't even want to do art, but you're like, well, we need something to fit in, you know. That could be a self-paced course that's free if they just enjoy like learning how to pencil draw, or whatever, different mediums and things like that. But you have to invest. I guess that's probably the best word. Invest in the things that matter most to reach your end goal.
Yes. And in this case, if we are doing self-paced, for the parents that are doing the work, the investment may be no money, but it will be time. We
Yes,
have to train
exactly.
them. We have to
Mm-hmm.
create those learning experiences,
Right.
and I think we have to make sure that there is no a magic pill, and we are not going to have, that, uh, this isn't, and it's not only our kids' fault. It's a
Mm-hmm.
combination of so many things that have to
Right.
happen. Their interest, the level
Mm-hmm.
of motivation, the learning
Yes.
circumstances that the learning is happening, so many things that
Mm-hmm.
we need to take in consideration. And then let's take the best option. Let's
Yeah.
take the best option. And I would strongly recommend,
Mm.
if you have a teenager, involve your teen in the decision making.
Yes, yes, exactly. I know my daughter just loves that. We're to the point where she could have actually graduated last year, and so we're just kind of spending the next 2 years of high school just doing things that she wants to do, and it may make it on her transcript or not, but she really doesn't need it. She's got enough credits to graduate. I just don't want to let her
Wow,
go. So yeah,
that's amazing.
that's a which well. She started kindergarten the week she turned 3, so it's been snowballing since. But yeah, that's a good point. Just to have parents to yeah, you do have to prepare. And so as far as when parents are looking at self-paced courses, are there some things that they should specifically look for based on a student that struggles, or when I guess when you look for a self-paced course in their description,
Mhm.
what are some maybe things that are positives to self-paced courses, other than just having access to a teacher? But I know there's a lot of different things out there. And what are some red flags that
Well, I think parents need to be realistic and say, okay, when are we going to start school? How many
mm,
chapters? How many modules? And be realistic about that. And then
yeah.
realize we're going to do this and skip this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when we're doing right now a math curriculum with my daughter, because we were doing a live class, but because what happened, things are now there, and I don't,
Right.
and she was not happy. I want to tell you
Oh
this,
no.
she was not happy. She's like, I don't want to do a computer math class. And
Oh.
I did, but we didn't have access to a teacher, and
Right.
so I say to her, well, we tested, we sat and we did like 3 tests of 3 different curriculums, and
Mm-hmm.
until we kind of compromise, I say to her, okay,
Ah,
let's
that's
do
a great
this.
idea.
If we do this curriculum, guess what? I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
purchased she wanted to do a prodigy math, which is game based, which
Mm-hmm.
is great. It's a great thing. But I told her we can't just do games. I want something that tells me what concepts are you learning. I
Right,
want to see
exactly.
progress. So we
Mm-hmm.
compromise, and she's a very strong will. So we compromise and say, okay, this is what we're going to combine. You know, and I
Mm-hmm.
think this is what parents need to do. But also, the curriculum has the option to add like 60 problems. Guess what? I only added 15.
Oh,
So,
so there's options for the parents to choose. That's a really good thing.
and I
Yeah.
think
Mm-hmm.
it's self-paced. You
Mm-hmm.
need to think about, okay, what is our time?
Right.
What is the realistic schedule? Are we gonna do from this time to this time? When I tell parents
Mm-hmm.
about my curriculum, I say that I need at least there are 6 modules, and you at least need 38 weeks. But some students they finish in 33. But I don't want to say that because I
Right.
include breathing room and between modules.
Mm-hmm.
So because I know my
Right.
students and I know that life happens,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Exactly.
because when I create courses, I'm thinking I'm making the course for my own kids, So
Mm-hmm.
in between modules, I created some breathing rooms, and I
Yes.
think, and another thing that I do, Peggy, and I don't know if this is helpful for parents, but at
Mm-hmm.
the end of each chapter or module or whatever, just reflect how this is going, how this is
Oh
working for us.
yeah.
Is this
Mm-hmm.
working or not? Are we gonna finish? What do we need to do? And
Right.
I do it with my kids all the time. You know, I
Mm-hmm.
I I don't really want to hire a tutor because I know how expensive they are. But
Exactly.
I ask them. But I always say to them, if we need to hire one, we're just gonna hire one. But the
Mm-hmm.
learning needs to keep going. So just
Right.
giving our kids the come and tell me if things are not working.
Mm-hmm. Right.
We're gonna figure it out a solution together. I think it will open
Mm-hmm.
up the conversation to more. Let's see how things are going, because a lot of things, sometimes I hear a lot of stories where teens don't tell the parents and their
Mm-hmm.
parents find out, and then there is a explosion like a battle.
Huge. Yes, exactly.
And sometimes our frustration level is so high, our stress
Mm-hmm.
level is so high because of
Right.
one course that is not being done.
Mm.
Sometimes, as parents, we even question, am I fit to homeschool? Just because something is not working.
That is a really good point. Yeah, and it's one class, but we can so hyper focus on that one thing. Oh, yes.
That
Yeah,
is
you
not
you hit
working.
the nail on the head
Yes. And
because everything else is working, but we don't see that as the positive. We just see the negative.
yes,
And yeah, now everything that you've talked about in this last hour, I mean, it's the program. You have to take a step back and look at the program and look at your student and how are things just not meshing, and what do we need to do.
this is the vehicle, this is the tool, but it's
Hmm.
not the why, it's not the what. Our student
Yes.
is the reference. They are the temperature. They are so
Hmm.
this is what we are measuring. It's a human being that is
Right.
interacting with that content. And
Hmm.
sometimes I have seen, Peggy, the shame and the guilt in my own
Hmm.
children when they cannot master something. And I think it's
Yes.
important. I always
Hmm.
have this in mind with Spanish. I know my students will not remember all the verb conjugations
Yes.
at the
Yeah.
end. They will
Yeah. Yeah.
they
They
will
won't.
forget,
Hmm.
but they will remember how I made them feel when they were learning
Yes.
Spanish. And we
Hmm.
need to think about that.
Hmm.
How as children feel when they are learning something
Hmm.
sometimes can break them or make them.
Yeah, and you bring up a very good point. Last week we were talking about outsourcing schooling and options, and the one thing that my guests talked about was when you hire a tutor or you use a course, remember that these people are speaking truth into your, or whatever else they're speaking it into your child's life on a regular basis. And so understanding their core values and why they're teaching, and just understanding that they're going to be speaking that into your child's life on a regular basis. So really look deeper.
That's
And
so true.
mhm,
And even, and sometimes, and this is something that I didn't think about this, Peggy, but you're right. Our kids are learning the values of that course creator,
yeah,
wherever
mhm,
it is, how they see life,
mhm,
and I think it's important. It's not just information. We are
no,
looking into
yeah,
transformation too.
mhm, yeah, so awesome. So I want to bring up your website again as we're wrapping up. But so tell us a little bit about. So you offer courses for Spanish for
Yes. So
elementary.
I
What?
help English speaking parents to educate bilingual children. So I understand how it is for you not to speak the language. A lot of my
Mhm.
parents, they study Spanish in high school and college, but they never spoke the language. So
Right.
I attract a lot of parents that want a different learning experience. I want
Mhm.
my kids
Mhm.
to speak. So I try my best. And my live classes is speaking classes. We meet
Mhm.
once a week to speak. And for my self-paced courses, obviously the parent has access to the content, but the idea is that even when it's self-paced, I always tell the parent the student should be opening their mouth talking to the computer. I don't care if they're talking to the dog or the cat, but they
Right.
should be talking to
Exactly.
someone, you know.
The
But
whole
they,
family will be
yeah.
bilingual.
So the idea is that the students will be moved. I call my students parrots, loros, like
Mhm.
parrots, because they
Mhm.
at the beginning you repeat everything that you hear,
Mm.
and then you move to describe, and then you move to explain. So I always tell parents we
Ah,
cannot expect the explaining part if we don't start with the repetitive part. So
right.
I always say repetition is important, and that's done in the first level,
Mhm.
either elementary or secondary. Now, my
Yeah.
secondary self-paced courses, they meet the requirements for high school diploma. And
Awesome.
I keep in mind when I create a course, I'm thinking my student may go to college and keep studying Spanish. So I prepare them
Right.
to,
Yeah.
to tackle the college Spanish curriculum too.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yes, that is important.
And I think the most important part, Peggy, to say this,
Mm-hmm.
I am
Yep.
passionate about students speaking Spanish, but I am even more passionate about uh, teaching also culture. I do
Mm,
believe that
yes.
students need to connect the big why. Why are they learning to speak Spanish?
Yeah.
And and I always say to my students, Spanish is not a subject, it's not a skill. It's also it's people.
Right.
Languages are people, are culture, are
Mm-hmm.
people like you and me that think different, eat different, and of course, the students love the eating part, right? Uh,
Right. Exactly.
they, but it's at the end of the day, I learned how to speak English because I wanted to connect with people like you,
Mm-hmm.
and learning English opens so many doors for me. So
Mm-hmm.
I have this idea that we should, as parents, teach our children that they should learn a language because they want to connect with the people that speak the language.
Right. Yeah, and that's it. Gets to the core of that. And that's beautiful. I love that because yeah, you go to other countries and you feel like there's that barrier, and so like when I've traveled, I've tried to learn as much as I can. Thankfully, Italian's very close to Spanish, so I could speak a lot of Italian. When I went to Russia, that was a whole different boat.
Let
A
me tell
different
you.
alphabet. But yeah, so but anyways, well, thank you so much, Kareem. This has been so awesome. I hope it has really encouraged parents to look into self-paced courses as an option because they really are, and there's so many good things to get out of them. But I mean, we did talk a lot about those tricky places too that can really get you, and
Benefits
just
and challenges.
exactly, yes. And so every curriculum has them. Doesn't matter if it's of a book or anything. It's just the way it is. So thank you so much.
Thank
We
you,
appreciate you
Peggy.
being on the
So happy to
show.
talk to you, my dear
I
friend.
know, I miss you.
Yes.
So we'll be able to see each other in person someday.
Yes.
Um, but thank you all for joining us here on SPED Homeschool Conversations. This is the end of our May month and internet resources. Next month, we are focusing on high school. But want to let you know that our regular Tuesday broadcasts are not going to happen for the next 2 weeks because I'm having surgery on Thursday. So we are having a matinee next Friday, and we are going to talk about what you need to know about accommodations after high school. And I'm talking with two pro bono lawyers from California that this is all they do. They work with a nonprofit called the IEP Project, and they help parents to understand what they need to do ahead of time so that they can request accommodations for their students after high school, whether it's college, tech schools, for jobs and the workforce and all those things. So that's what we're going to start kick off the month of June with. So hopefully you can join us for that. So, so then we'll see everybody. Hopefully I will be somewhat recovered and not on too much pain medication when we come back.
We'll be in our prayers.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Adios.
Adios.
Bye.